Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
Good evening, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the broadcast. Here are tonight's headlines.
The influential sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on Friday said it was admirable of the South to propose a formal end to the Korean War, but demanded Seoul first drop its hostile policies towards Pyongyang.
A shooter opened fire at a supermarket near Memphis, Tennessee, killing at least one person and injuring 12 others before he shot himself dead.
So it's
the Democratic,
the debt ceiling.
The leader of the Democratic-controlled U.S. House of Representatives vowed to avert a looming government shutdown as federal funds run out, despite the pledge by opposition Republicans to block the move.
And the World Health Organization on Friday recommended the synthetic antibody treatment Regeneron for COVID-19, but only in patients with specific health profiles.
First, the influential sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on Friday said it was admirable of the South to propose a formal end to the Korean War, but demanded Seoul first drop its hostile policies towards Pyongyang. Kim Jo-young's remarks, carried by Pyongyang official KCNA news agency, were in response to South Korean President Moon Jae-in's recent calls for declaring an official end to the 1950-53 conflict that ended in a truce and not a peace treaty, leaving the two sides technically at war for more than half a century. In a speech at the UN General Assembly earlier this week, President Moon proposed a declaration of an end to the conflict that broke out 71 years ago, stressing that such an act would make irreversible progress in denuclearization and usher in an era of complete peace. Kim, a key policy advisor to her brother Kim Jong-un, said it was an admirable idea to propose a formal end to the war. But she insisted the South should remove its hostile attitude first. Making such a declaration with double-dealing standards, she said, prejudice and hostile policies still in place does not make any sense.
A volcanologist working on the Canary Islands says it will take many days for the lava from the Cumbre Vieja volcano to reach the coast, if it does at all. Now, the volcano erupted on Sunday in the south of the island, one of the 7 that make up the Canary Islands archipelago off the coast of Morocco. Watch this.
A ver, en caso de que llegara al mar, tardarían todavía bastantes días, ya que la velocidad, por ejemplo, para que nos hagamos idea, la velocidad ayer era casi 4 metros por hora. Entonces, si estamos, no sé, cerca de 1 kilómetro, pues podemos imaginarnos lo que podemos tardar, ¿no? Si la colada de lava llega al mar a través de un acantilado, habría un peligro ahí, que es que se puede romper la colada, se va a romper, y entonces se puede haber un desprendimiento de gases, puede haber pequeños flujos piroclásticos hacia el mar, que entrando lo que habría es pues una gran emisión de vapor de agua, porque calienta y vaporiza el agua, ¿no? Y emisión de gases, ¿no? Lo que hay que hacer es estar alejados de la costa y también de la zona donde puede caer.
According to CBS News, the Institute reported that Tuesday night saw a strong increase in the number of smaller eruptions that hurl rocks and cinders high into the air on the island of La Palma, one of the Canary Islands of northwest Africa. Authorities say that dangers still lie ahead for residents, including earthquakes, lava flows, toxic gases, volcanic ash, and acid rain. The meeting of the lava, whose temperature exceeds 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit with a body of water, could cause explosions and produce clouds of toxic gas.
Meanwhile, Guatemala's Fuego volcano began a strong eruptive phase on Thursday, spewing lava and ash in a series of explosions that have not yet forced any evacuations, according to authorities. Take a look. Now, the eruptions produced a long river of lava flowing down to the base of the volcano, some 35 kilometers or 22 miles southwest of the capital Guatemala City, according to Emilio Barillas of the Insubeme Volcano Institute. Fuego, 3.7 kilometers high or 12,240 feet, is one of the 3 active volcanoes in Guatemala. The recently recorded activity is the strongest since June 2018, when Fuego unleashed a torrent of mud and ash that wiped the village of San Miguel Los Lotes from the map, according to Barillas. More than 200 people then were killed.
5 climbers died after a blizzard on Mount Elbrus, Europe's highest peak. Russia's emergency ministry said that. Now, Thursday's incident struck when a group of 19 climbers were at an altitude of over 5,000 meters or 16,000 feet. Elbrus, located in Russia's North Caucasus, is the highest mountain in Europe at 5,642 meters or 18,510 feet. The remaining 14 were taken down to the Azan Valley below, and the rescue was carried out in the most difficult conditions with strong winds, low visibility, and sub-zero temperatures. The company which organized the climb said there were 4 professional guides accompanying the climbers. During the ascent, one of the climbers felt unwell and turned back with one of the guides. She later died in his arms, it said. Now, the rest of the group continued to the summit, but an unprecedented storm struck on their way down. One of the climbers broke a leg, further slowing down the group. The guides and some of the participants have been hospitalized with frostbite, while the ascent is not considered technically difficult. Dozens of climbers die every year during summit attempts. 2 climbers froze to death and 2 others lost consciousness and died as they were brought down.
Secretary General Antonio Guterres told the Security Council that the effects of climate change are particularly profound when they overlap with fragility and past or current conflicts and are complicating efforts to prevent conflict and to sustain peace. Let's listen in.
The effects of climate change are particularly profound when they overlap with fragility and past or current conflicts. It is clear that climate change and environmental mismanagement are risk multipliers. Where coping capacities are limited and there is high dependence on shrinking natural resources and ecosystem services, such as water and fertile land, grievances and tensions can explode, complicating efforts to prevent conflict and to sustain peace. Last year, more than 30 million people were displaced by climate-related disasters. 90% of refugees come from countries that are among the most vulnerable and least able to adapt to the effects of climate change. Many of these refugees are in turn hosted by countries that are also suffering the impacts of climate change, compounding the challenge for host communities and national budgets.
The climate crisis isn't coming. It's already here. And clear patterns are emerging in its impact. The consequences are falling disproportionately on vulnerable and low-income populations. And there are worsening conditions and human suffering in places already afflicted by conflict, high levels of violence, instability. These mounting impacts, together with the synthesis report released last week and the comprehensive report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released last month, underscore the urgent need to dramatically cut our emissions and build our resilience for the inevitable changes to come.
The obvious linkage now between climate and security and the impact of people on the ground, the impact on our peacekeepers, and the link to conflict, and as a factor in conflict. Not the only factor, but as a factor in conflict. So climate change, it was accepted as a universal issue facing humankind. So it makes sense that the very high level of diplomacy that the Security Council, clearly the highest level, represents, should engage and deal with this issue.
In other news, a shooter opened fire Thursday at a supermarket near Memphis, Tennessee, killing at least one person and injuring 12 others before he shot himself dead, that according to police. The rampage occurred at a Kroger grocery store in Collierville, a suburban town east of Memphis. One victim was killed while the shooter died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, that according to police chief Dale Lane to reporters. Lane said some of the victims had very serious injuries and cautioned that the toll from the tragedy could rise. Multiple forces, including SWAT teams, converged on the supermarket to secure the area, with police going aisle to help employees and shoppers evacuate the building. He described a horrific scene at the store where officers found people hiding in freezers and in locked offices. Lane would not say whether the assailant was a Kroger employee, but added that the shooting was under investigation by the FBI and other agencies. Mass shootings and other gun violence are huge problems in the United States, issues that gun control advocates say are fueled by the prevalence of firearms and relatively lax gun laws.
The U.S. Special Envoy to Haiti resigned 2 months after his appointment, denouncing the Biden administration's deportation of Haitian migrants from the U.S.-Mexico border back to their poverty-stricken homeland. I will not be associated with the United States' inhumane, counterproductive decision to deport thousands of Haitian refugees and illegal immigrants to Haiti, State Department envoy Daniel Foote said in a scathing letter of resignation. Foote described Haiti as a place where U.S. diplomats are confined to secure compounds because of the danger posed by armed gangs in control of daily life. Footage of the migrants, many of them families, massing under a highway bridge and moving back and forth to Mexico for food have shocked America and sparked a fresh crisis over migrant policy. Many Haitian migrants are still in Ciudad Acuña, where they also risk being deported. On Thursday, scores of Mexican police officers arrived at their camp, ratcheting up tensions. Foote condemned the repatriations in his resignation letter and said the Biden administration wasn't supporting a return to democracy in Haiti after the July 7 assassination of President Jovenel Moise.
Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin has appealed his conviction for the murder of George Floyd, citing 14 complaints about his high-profile trial earlier this year in a case that roiled the United States and laid bare deep racial divisions. The killing of Floyd, a 46-year-old man, in May 2020 went viral after being caught on camera and sparked America's biggest demonstrations for racial justice in decades. Chauvin, who in June was sentenced to more than 22 years in prison for killing Floyd by kneeling on his neck for nearly 10 minutes, appealed the conviction Thursday night with a Minnesota District Court on the last day he was able to do so. He accuses the state of prejudicial misconduct and lists multiple issues with the jury selected for the trial, among other objections. Now, the former police officer accuses the court of abusing its discretion by denying requests to postpone or move the trial and refusing to sequester the jury for its duration. Chauvin, a 45-year-old white man, was filmed kneeling on Floyd's neck, indifferent to the dying man's groans and to the pleas of distraught passersby.
In other news, President Joe Biden on Friday deepens his bid to cement U.S. leadership of the Indo-Pacific against a rising China with the first in-person summit of the regional Quad group. Meeting in the White House, Biden and the leaders of Australia, India, and Japan will discuss the COVID vaccines drive, regional infrastructure, climate change, and securing supply chains for the semiconductors used in computer technology. While China is not officially on the agenda, the Quad will stress backing for a free and open Indo-Pacific, according to a senior U.S. official telling this to reporters. That's a phrase often standing in for ensuring that Communist China will not end up dominating the region, including vital international sea lanes. U.S. officials are keen to stress there is no military component in the Quad. They also say it is not meant to rival or undermine the preeminent regional grouping ASEAN, which includes China. Just ahead of the Quad summit, China made a major play of its own by applying to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, a huge regional free trade pact. The United States had joined the pact's previous version, the TPP, until Donald Trump pulled out in 2017.
In other news, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris meets Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the Eisenhower Executive Office building that's next to the White House. Ms. Harris is the first woman and first Black and South Asian vice president. Prime Minister Modi congratulated Ms. Harris on her historic position and invited her to return the visit. Prime Minister Modi will also attend the so-called Quad Summit with Mr. Biden and leaders of Australia and Japan on Friday, part of a White House effort to boost cooperation in the Asia-Pacific region.
Challenge highlighted that fact, be it COVID-19.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by North Luzon Express Terminal.
Bago magkaroon ng COVID-19 pandemic, maunlad ang industriya ng fashion design. Metropolitan cities hosted annual shows with designers and celebrities coming from all over the world. 2020 was supposed to be an exciting year for the industry. Ngunit nang magkaroon ng pandemya, ipinatupad ang lockdown sa iba't ibang lugar. Kanselado ang mga fashion shows at marami ring fashion shops ang nagsara. It has been almost 2 years since the outbreak of the COVID-19 crisis with no end in sight. So what will be the future of fashion design and fashion in general? In this episode, we'll find out more about the fashion design industry during the pandemic with our guests from the Fashion Designers Association of the Philippines, Mr. Gil Granado and Jonathan Pagatuan. All these in this episode of Open for Business.
Iba't ibang sakuna at kalamidad ang nararanasan ng bansa. Kapag may banta ng panganib, kailangang maging alerto at kung kailangang lumikas ay magtungo sa ligtas na lugar. Bilang paghahanda sa mga ganitong pagkakataon, mahalaga na may gobag na dadalhin ang pamilya. Narito ang dapat na nilalaman ng gobag ng isang pamilyang handa. Mahalagang dokumento sa selyadong lalagyan, flashlight, kandila, posporo at silbato, radyo na may bago at ekstrang baterya, first aid kit kasama ang panlunas pagkain na madaling ihanda, di na kailangang lutuin at sapat para sa 3 araw. Inuming tubig sa saradong lalagyan at sapat para sa 3 araw. Telepono, power bank at charger. Lubid, lumang dyaryo, matitibay na lalagyan. Damit, kapote, bota at mga sanitary supplies. Sleeping bag o banig at mga kumot. Suriin ang mga laman ng gobag kada 3 buwan. At palitan ang mga laman nito na malapit nang masira. Ilagay ang gobag sa lugar na madali itong makita at makuha sa oras ng sakuna.
Welcome back. The deployment of overseas Filipino workers or OFWs to Macau is still suspended. That according to the Philippine Overseas Labor Office or PALO today. Now, in a virtual briefing, Marianena Herman, labor attaché in Macau, said the host territory has yet to accept migrant workers, including Filipino workers, as its economy has yet to fully open due to the threat of COVID-19. She said Macau stopped accepting both foreign workers and tourists since March of 2020. Since March 2020, all commercial flights to Macau were canceled or suspended. Maybe that's also the reason why the number of COVID cases hasn't increased here since they don't allow entry until now, she added. Herman said based on the latest figure, the territory has 0 active cases of the virus. Only 63 cases were recorded earlier in the Chinese semi-autonomous region. On the other hand, Herman reported that close to 4,000 OFWs have been repatriated after losing their jobs due to the pandemic as of this month. Prior to the pandemic, the labor attaché added that the number of Filipinos in Macau is at 34,180, but it reduced to 28,639 as of July 2021. She said the number continues to decrease as they recorded hundreds of workers that have lost their jobs every month since January up to July.
Violence that has rocked Myanmar following a military coup in February shows alarming signs of escalating into a widespread civil war. That according to UN Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet on Thursday. At the Human Rights Council in Geneva, Ms. Bachelet said that clashes occur regularly between civilian fighters and government forces in many areas of the country where conflict has not been seen in generations. Take a look.
The human rights situation in Myanmar has deteriorated significantly as the far-reaching impacts of the military coup continue to devastate lives and hopes across the country. Conflict, poverty, and the effects of the pandemics are sharply increasing, and the country faces a vortex of repression, violence, and economic collapse. We continue to receive reports from multiple locations of interrogation techniques that amount to ill treatment and torture, and have credible information that more than 120 detainees have died in custody, some within 24 hours of their arrest. Faced with this overwhelming repression of fundamental rights, a movement of armed resistance is growing, alongside the peaceful protests that have taken place for 7 months. Local self-defense groups have taken arms, and many have joined a growing so-called defense force movement. I appeal once again to all armed actors to respect human rights and ensure that civilians and civilian structures are protected. Use of airstrikes and artillery in residential areas and any form of military operation that targets health centers, places of worship, schools, or other protected structures must immediately cease. Excellencies, these disturbing trends suggest the alarming possibility of an escalating civil war.
Presenting a news report on Myanmar to the Council, Ms. Bachelet explained that it detailed many serious violations of human rights and international humanitarian law. She also added several of these violations may amount to crimes against humanity or war crimes.
In other news, there's been little sign of healthier eating by the world's youngest children in the last 10 years, that according to the United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF. A new report from the agency released ahead of the UN Food Systems Summit this week indicates that rising poverty, inequality, conflict, climate-related disasters, and the COVID-19 pandemic have all contributed to the nutrition crisis. Poor nutritional intake in the first 2 years of life can irreversibly harm children's rapidly growing bodies, according to UNICEF Executive Director Henrietta Fore. In an analysis of 91 countries, UNICEF found that only half of infants aged 6 to 23 months receive the recommended number of meals a day. Just a third get the minimum number of food groups they need to thrive, while children in rural areas or from poorer households are also significantly more likely to be fed poor diets compared to their urban or wealthier peers. Further analysis of 50 countries revealed that these poor feeding patterns have persisted throughout the last decade.
Now, exiled former Catalan President Charles Puigdemont was awaiting a court hearing in Italy Friday after being arrested 4 years after fleeing Spain in the aftermath of the independence referendum that Madrid ruled illegal. The European MEP, who has been based in Belgium since the 2017 referendum, was detained in the Sardinian town of Alghero on Thursday. His chief of staff, Josep Luis Alay, said. Puigdemont, at 58, is wanted in Spain on allegations of sedition over his attempts to have Catalonia break away from Madrid through the 2017 referendum. His arrest comes a week after the left-leaning Spanish government and regional Catalan authorities resumed negotiations to find a solution to Spain's worst political crisis in decades. In March, the European Parliament rescinded immunity for Puigdemont and two other pro-independence MEPs, a decision that was upheld in July by the EU's General Court. However, the European Parliament's decision is under appeal and a final ruling by the EU Court has yet to be made.
In other news, the World Health Organization on Friday recommended the synthetic antibody treatment Regeneron for COVID-19, but only in patients with specific health profiles. Persons with non-severe COVID-19 who are nonetheless at high risk of hospitalization can take the antibody combo, as should critically ill patients unable to mount an adequate immune response, according to a WHO finding published in the BMJ. Regeneron is only the third treatment for COVID to be recommended by the Global Health Authority, which added it to its living WHO guideline on drugs for COVID-19. In July, WHO gave the nod to a class of drugs that act to suppress a dangerous overreaction of the immune system to the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID. These medicines work well in tandem with corticosteroids, which were first recommended by WHO for use in COVID patients in September of 2020. The Regeneron cocktail of synthetic antibodies, casirivimab and imdevimab, has been found to reduce the risk of hospitalization for unvaccinated, elderly, or immunosuppressed patients with COVID, according to 3 clinical trials that have yet to be peer-reviewed, according to the report, or according to the BMJ. For the second category of patient covered by the new WHO recommendation, another trial has reported a reduced number of deaths and cases requiring mechanical ventilation in patients taking the drugs.
Now, here in the Philippines, a total of 9,088 individuals have recovered from COVID-19 on Friday, bringing the total recoveries to 2,240,599, or 91.3% of all known infections in the country. In its daily COVID-19 bulletin, the Department of Health also reported 18,659 new cases of COVID-19, with the number of active cases now at 175,324. Of these active cases, it said the majority at 88.1% have mild symptoms, followed by the asymptomatic at 6.9%, those with moderate symptoms at 2.84%, those with severe symptoms at 1.5%, and those in critical condition at 0.7%. No new deaths were recorded, with the country's current total or mortality against COVID-19 remaining at 37,405, or 1.52% of all known cases.
In other pandemic news, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention today overruled its own panel of health experts to back Pfizer COVID vaccine booster shots for individuals at high risk of exposure because of their jobs. Take a look. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky said the agency had to act on complex, often imperfect data for the greater good of public health. She said in a statement that in a pandemic, even with uncertainty, they must take actions that they anticipate will do the greatest good. The CDC also backed the panel's recommendation of booster shots for over 65s and some with underlying medical conditions. The recommendations are only for people who had their vaccine doses at least 6 months ago. In a pandemic, even with uncertainty, we must take actions that we anticipate will do the greatest good, she said in a statement. Now, the recommendations are for people who had their vaccine doses at least 6 months ago.
Thank you so much. Share with me later. Make sure I'm on my good side.
Meanwhile, vaccine passports or proof of vaccinations is now in effect across the province of Ontario, Canada. Here's Joshua Santillana of our EBC Canada Bureau with that story.
Vaccine passports, or proof of vaccination, is now in effect across the province of Ontario, Canada, starting Wednesday, September 22nd. Premier Doug Ford announced the coming of vaccine passports a few weeks ago, preparing Ontarians for another significant change in the way people assess some select services. Proof of vaccination and identity must be presented to access certain indoor businesses and settings. Proof of identity could be any of these following documents: birth certificate, driver's license, health card or passport, citizenship card, permanent resident card, or Indian status or Indigenous membership card. Proof of vaccination may be downloaded at covid19.ontariohealth.ca. Here are some of the indoor public settings that will require vaccine certificates. Indoor areas of meeting and event spaces, which include banquet halls and convention centers, restaurant and food establishment excluding delivery, takeout, and outdoor patios, indoor gyms and sports facilities, concert venues, theaters, and cinemas. Indoor areas where film and TV production take place with studio audience. Premier Doug Ford encourages everyone to be patient with the rollout of the vaccine certificate program. Take a listen.
A proof of vaccination is required to select settings. Please be patient as we roll the vaccine certificate program out. Do not take your frustrations out on businesses or their staff. We know this will be tough for some, but we owe it to our businesses to do everything we can to avoid lockdowns.
Well, today is the first day of our certification process,
which means that when you want to go inside, whether it's to work out at a gym, fitness center, perhaps go out with your family for a meal inside a restaurant, we are asking that you show proof of vaccination. It's very simple. All you need is the card, the piece of paper that you already received when you got your vaccination.
The province of Ontario reported Wednesday 463 new cases of COVID-19, 332 cases of which are not fully vaccinated, 187 people are in the ICU, and 178 of those in the ICU are not fully vaccinated. In Toronto, Joshua Santillana, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Joshua. Eagle News will be back with more stories. Please don't go away.
This portion is brought to you by Stagecraft International, the preferred choice.
Ngayong may pandemya, marami ang walang trabaho at mataas ang presyo ng bilihin. Isa sa nakikitang solusyon para makaiwas sa pagkagutom ay ang pagtatanim. May ilan problemado sa espasyo dahil maliit ang kanilang lugar. Pero may sagot riyan para makapagtanim, ang hydroponics. Sa hydroponics, hindi ginagamitan ng lupa ang pinagtataniman, kundi tubig at nutrient solution lamang. Sa hydroponics, makakapagtanim ka ng gulay at kahit anong halaman. Masusolusyonan ang problema sa kagutuman at matutugunan ang seguridad sa pagkain.
Hindi rin namin in-expect kasi pagkagising namin, mababa muna yung tubig. Tapos ilang minutes lang talagang napakataas na.
Ang lakas ng ulan kasi, tapos bigla na lang pumasok yung baha dyan.
Ang ano ko, iniisip ko, makasurvive lang. Hindi naman importante talaga yung mga gamit. Mahina pa ako noon nung time na yun kasi kakagaling ko lang sa sakit. Sa pag-aalala rin, yung sa sitwasyon ngayon, yung pandemic, lalong hindi naging stable yung trabaho ko eh. Dito sa Zambales, ang hanap buhay ko auto-body builder. Siyempre, on-call ka lang tapos nawala pa yung company mo. So, talagang mahirap. Harapin ko ng buong buo yung mga susunod pang mga mangyayari. At magkakaroon na ako ng kumpiyansa sa sarili. Nananalangin ako. Sabi ko, Ama, tulungan mo naman ako sa mga oras na ito. Bigyan mo ako ng lakas ng loob. Lakas ng pangangatawan. Maraming salamat po kay Eduardo. Kahit pa paano po ay nabigyan ng kalutasan yung suliranin namin.
Ang mga bagong balita aarangkada kada umaga.
Welcome back. China's central bank today said all financial transactions involving cryptocurrencies are illegal, sounding the death knell for digital currencies in China after a crackdown on the volatile trade. Take a look. The global values of cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, have massively fluctuated over the past year, partly due to Chinese regulations, which have sought to prevent speculation and money laundering. Now, virtual currency-related business activities are illegal financial activities, according to the People's Bank of China in an online statement on Friday, adding that offenders would be investigated for criminal liability in accordance with the law. The notice bans all related financial activities involving cryptocurrencies, such as trading crypto, selling tokens, transactions involving virtual currency derivatives, and illegal fundraising. In June, Chinese officials said more than 1,000 people had been arrested for using the profits from crime to buy cryptocurrencies.
In other news, embattled Chinese property titan Evergrande battles to avoid a collapse that many fear could send shockwaves through the world's #2 economy. Capital Economics Chief Asia economist Mark Williams sees a default of the company as pretty much inevitable at this point. Watch this.
And they've obviously been sort of scrabbling around trying to raise cash, trying to sell assets. They've been cutting prices of their properties to try and raise some revenue, but it's looking increasingly difficult. There'll be significant haircuts on bonds. People won't get back the money that they thought they were going to get back. So in that sense, yeah, I think a default is pretty much inevitable at this point. Actually, we can see that other than Evergrande is the only one of the big 30 developers that currently crosses the government's 3 red lines. Other developers have been able to improve their balance sheets over the past 12 months. And so I think from the government's perspective, it's been pretty successful at reining in leverage. Where I do think that there could be some backing off is if we were to see a sharp fall in property sales over the next few months, maybe people start to worry about pre-sales of buying properties that haven't been finished because Evergrande collapses. Maybe they just start to worry about whether property is a good long-run investment if prices stop rising. So whatever happens here, if they get through the next few months, I think they probably will, but they face a very, very difficult few years ahead. It's not going to be a great time to be a property developer or to be exposed to property construction in China. That's
Furious home buyers and investors around the country have gathered to demand repayment as the developer drowns in a sea of debt more than $300 billion and struggles to meet its obligations. Financial markets have tumbled over fears that the Chinese group could collapse, leading to possible contagion in the world's second biggest economy and beyond. Fitch Ratings said it expected growth to come in at 8.1% this year, compared with a previous 8.4% estimate, saying the main factor weighing on the outlook is the slowdown in the property sector. Weakness in the property market comes after a recent bout of regulatory tightening by authorities looking to rein in surging prices and companies' excessive borrowing. Beijing has cracked down on developers in a bid to force them to offload debt, introducing its 3 red lines to curb leverage last year.
The leader of the Democratic-controlled U.S. House of Representatives vowed Thursday to avert a looming government shutdown as federal funds run out, despite a pledge by the opposition Republicans to block the move. The chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve calls on lawmakers earlier to raise the nation's borrowing limit urgently, warning that failure to pay government debts would do severe damage to the economy. Let's take a look.
So it's just very important that the debt ceiling be raised in a timely fashion so that the United States can pay its bills when and as they come due. That's a critically important thing. The failure to do that is something that could result in severe reactions, severe damage to the economy and to the financial markets, and it's just not something that we could contemplate, that we should contemplate. I think we can all agree that the United States shouldn't default on any of its obligations, should pay them when and as due, and that no one should assume that the Fed or anyone else can protect the markets or the economy in the event of a failure, fully protect in the event of a failure.
Lawmakers have until September 30 to greenlight a package to fund the government ahead of the stoppage, which typically leads to hundreds of thousands of workers being sent home while parks, museums, and other federal properties and services are closed. The House passed a continuing resolution Tuesday, which would keep federal agencies open until December 3, a move supported by Republicans. But Democratic leaders also attached a debt ceiling suspension following warnings that the Treasury Department will be unable to obtain new loans sometime in October. The debt ceiling is the amount above which the country cannot issue new loans to fund government agencies and make loan repayments. Economists estimate that failure to extend the debt limit would erase 6 million jobs and wipe out $15 trillion of household wealth, tanking the economy and threatening a global meltdown. Republicans are refusing to help solve the impasse in protest at President Joe Biden's plans for an irresponsible $3.5 trillion public works package on top of a $1.2 trillion infrastructure spending bill that already passed the Senate with cross-party support. Without Republican backing, however, it's not clear how the CR will get the 60 votes it needs to advance in the Senate, where the 100 seats are evenly divided between the two parties. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by Innovexcel Printing Services, excellence in innovation. For inquiries, you may call Mark D. Mayuga at 0917-900-6396.
Welcome back to the news. Iglesia Ni Cristo members from Manitoba helped plant more trees in the Albina Park. The activity was conducted while maintaining proper social distancing and other imposed limits on outdoor gatherings to prevent the spread of the pandemic. Kathleen Maypangan reports.
Last year, the members of the Iglesia ni Cristo or Church of Christ here in the city of Winnipeg planted trees to beautify their community. This year, city officials took notice and asked the Iglesia ni Cristo or Church of Christ to help in planting 350 trees here in Albina Park in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. All age groups participated in this activity to help with the city's green initiative. Members of Parliament also showed up to show their support of the tree planting activity.
So today we planted 350 trees that are native to Winnipeg. This is all part of the 1 million tree challenge in the city of Winnipeg.
And you know, it's extra special for me. I come to a lot of Church of Christ events, but the reason this one is extra special for me is it's actually in the heart of my constituency here in the north end of Winnipeg. And so we're out, there's about 300 of us coming and going throughout the day, planting 350 trees, as you can see, along a beautiful lakefront, and trying to make our community just a little bit more nature-esque and beautiful.
You know, it's really encouraging when you have a church organization such as the Church of Christ, a church that is all over the world nowadays, recognizing what young people and others are talking about a great deal, and that's our environment. And Church of Christ is stepping up in a very real and tangible way, but it also sends a wonderful message to the community at whole in the value of planting trees, and we should all be concerned about our environment.
It was a fun-filled day filled not only with fresh air, but with unity from the members of the Iglesia ni Cristo Church of Christ. Reporting for Eagle News from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, I'm Kathleen May Pangan. We live in interesting times.
In Papua New Guinea, a night of fashion at the fashion runway. This is the NGCB Paradise runway, kicked off with amazing designers' creation. And at the scene was Echo Hortaleza. Heko.
Fashion runway highlights the designers' creations, the clothing, the models, and the styles. Let's witness tonight's Paradise Runway here at Hilton Hotel, Port Moresby. Be surprised, be amazed. The biggest night of fashion show and fashion runway was unfolded in Papua New Guinea when National Gaming Control Board, or the NGCB Paradise Runway, Papua New Guinea Fashion Week, Glow Hair Boutique and Glow Boutique light up the stage of Hilton Hotel to promote and showcase chic styles, fashion collections, and fashion alliance and creations of 12 top designers of this land. National Gaming Control Board Chief Executive Officer Imelda Agon emphasized that through this kind of project, Papua New Guinea can achieve economic independence. This runway show empowered top trends and their own versions of creating unique and fascinating get-up-to-the-minute wear, couture, feathers into treasure, and intricately crafted beads, fine garments, and billows. The overwhelming feeling that came over the crowd was when these beyond beautiful styling wardrobes inspired and took a sight to behold and exceeded all expectations. The models nailed it and their catwalks were all spot on. The designers' passion shone through their magnificent creations and collections. The event was also highlighted by the awards given to the winners. Cynthia Chapman was declared Established Designer of the Year.
Congratulations.
The Innovation Award goes to Anna Amos, Creative Director of Papua New Guinea Fashion and Design Week Virtual Runway. The much-awaited Model of the Year goes to Samuel Topo and the heart-tugging announcement for the Best Designer of the Year, whose embellished masterpiece truly captured the attention of the attendees, landed to Tabu Peli Warupi.
Very exciting. I'm extremely blessed to have a wonderful support system who have helped me in creating, my children, my family. This is all because of them. I had just come off a runway about less than a month ago. This one was kind of a sort of a last-minute one, but we pulled through and we got the prize. I'd like to thank the organizers and my fellow designers as well, who were also nominated. We're all, a bunch of good friends, and we're all very happy about this winter. So a win for one means a win for all. So thank you.
Fashion Foundation founder, Ms. Filma Kelegay, and Managing Director of Glow Hair Boutique and Glow Boutique, Zia Rayani, who were both ravishing and stunning at that night, were behind this successful and prestigious event. They both built a steadfast and defining moment for this well-organized, inspiring, and impressive fashion runway.
It's a celebration of PNG culture and art, and not only do we celebrate it, but we recognize the artists who are behind the scene, who create the amazing garments that we wear.
We're super excited and so proud of everybody that's been involved in this show. It was a beautiful show that really got to showcase their art, the art of design, and I think it differed from a lot of shows before and a lot of their work before. I've really seen them step up today. So building and developing and just keep pushing the industry and see how far we can get.
Get ready for next year's show.
Anybody who wants to be involved in the industry, it's a huge industry and we haven't even tapped into it, not even close. So yeah, get involved and hear what's going on and be a part of it. I'm excited. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, congratulations to all the organizers, sponsors, and talents. You have brought a huge and remarkable difference in Papua New Guinea's fashion industry. Reporting from Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea, this is Echo Hortaleza Quinola, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Echo. She looks so cute.
Thank you. Well, that's a really good way to end our broadcast tonight. And that's it for the news. I am CJ Hero. The news continues tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and
we live
in interesting times.